Hello everybody, I hope you are doing well, and today's video is going to cover lesson 5-5, which talks about the Pythagorean theorem. And now the Pythagorean theorem specifically applies to right triangles. Okay, it's the special formula that compares the three sides of a right triangle, and it's the only triangle that this works for. So the Pythagorean theorem is a squared a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that's the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the way that this works is that a and b are what we call the legs of our right triangle. They are the sides that make up the right angle. Okay, so if you have a right angle on a triangle, the two sides that make up that right angle are what we call the legs of the triangle. Okay, so A and B are these two sides of this right triangle. C is what we call the hypotenuse. Okay, this is the longest side of the right triangle. It is opposite of the right angle, and that is C. Okay, it is opposite of that right angle, and it connects A and B together. Okay, so that's the basic idea, is that if we take A and square it plus B and square it, that'll give us whatever C squared is. And that this common fact lets us be able to find missing side lengths. So your assignment for this lesson was page 415, numbers 1 through 9. And there's some different things we have to look at. Sometimes we have to find the hypotenuse. Sometimes we're going to have to find the legs. It just depends on how the question is worded. So I'm going to show you one of each. So I'm going to do 1 and 2. 1 and 2. And I'm going to show you a question like number 4. And yeah, and that should help you out with the rest of the problems. Okay. So each time I would write out a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That way you know what you're looking for, and if you want to even draw off to the side a picture, that way you know that a and b make up that right angle, and c is the longest side. Okay? So if I'm looking at number 1, okay, a and b, it doesn't matter which one's which here. Maybe I want to make 12a, and I want to make b 5, right? In that case, then 12 squared plus 5 squared, and we don't know what c is. That's our missing piece, so we're just going to leave it as c. Okay? So 12 squared is 144, plus 5 squared is 25, and that's going to equal c squared. Alright, now you can keep following this process. What can you do next? Well, we can add 144 plus 125, and that gives us 169 equals c squared. And now how do we find for c? Because that's what we're ultimately looking for, is c. Well, we need to get c by itself. It's being squared, so I have to do the opposite of squaring. And remember that the opposite of squaring is taking the square root, right? So I'm going to take the square root of c squared, but whatever I do to one side, I do to the other, and the square root of 169 is 13, okay? And that's going to equal c. All right, so that's my answer for number 1. That's my missing side length, so c would equal 13 inches. Okay, so that's kind of the process that you're going to follow each time to figure out these missing pieces. On number 2, this time we're not missing the hypotenuse, we're actually missing one of the legs. Okay, so we know that A is the missing length. That means 51 has to be B, and 60 is the hypotenuse, which is C. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and write out a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I'm going to fill in what I know. Well, a squared is just going to stay a, plus b is 51, so 51 squared equals, and then c was 60, so 60 squared. Okay, and at this point you have to keep asking yourself, okay, what can I do to solve for this? Well, I could do 51 squared, right? 51 times 51, which is 2,601. So I have a squared plus 2,601, and then 60 squared, which I know is 3,600. And now we have this equation that I can solve. Since I'm solving for a squared, right, we need to get a by itself, so I subtract 2601 from both sides. So 3600 minus 2601, and that gives me 999. On this left-hand side, we're left with a squared, because the 2601 cancels. And then, once again, to get a by itself, we have to take the square root, since it's being squared, and then that will give me a equals, and then whatever the square root of 999 is, and then that's not a whole number, so we have to read the directions, round to the nearest tenth, right? So when I did this, I got 31.606. Okay, so if I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, that's just going to be 31.6. Okay, so that is letter A. That's the side A for number 2. Okay, and make sure you have your units labeled for that. Okay, so that's like numbers 1 and 2. That'll help you out with 3. That will also help you out with 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, 7, 8, and 9, the only difference there is that you don't have a picture. They give you the letters to use, and you just have to find the missing side. Okay, now 4 and 5 is a little bit different. 4 and 5, they actually give you 3 sides of a triangle. And your goal is to say, okay, is this a right triangle? So what we have to do is we have to take these side lengths and plug them into my formula and see if it works. Okay, so for example here, we have 28, 195, and 197. To figure this out, remember I said we have to plug it into that formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And if you think about a right triangle, we said that c, the hypotenuse, represents the longest side. So I know that 197, if this was a right triangle, I would have to plug it in for c, right? So that would be 197, and then I still have to square it because that's only c in the question. That means 28 and 195 both have to be a and b. So now what I can do is I can go through and solve it and see if those are equal. And if they are, it is a right triangle. If they're not, then it is not a right triangle. So in this case, 28 squared is 784 plus 195 squared is 38025, and 197 squared is 38809. And now I only have one last step. I have to add these two together. So 784 plus 38025, and that gives me 38809, right? And notice the other side was also 38809. So since it is the same on both sides, right, when I take it all the way down, that means, yes, this has to be a right triangle. Okay? And we could say yes, because it satisfies the Pythagorean theorem, because it satisfies the Pythagorean theorem. It's hard to write with this pen. Okay, but you would do the same idea with number 30. You would plug it into that formula, you would square everything, and then add those two side lengths together, and if they're equal on both sides of the equal sign, it's a right triangle. If they're not, then it's not a right triangle, and then you could say, you could justify it with your work. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. Hopefully it's helpful. I posted today that I was going to start offering office hours twice a week, and that's I recommend you using that if you are struggling with some of this stuff. And it's just a place where you can come to the Zoom meeting and ask questions. I can help you out more directly with some more questions that you might have personally. And I'm going to do that twice a week. So tomorrow it is going to be, I think I said 11 to 11:30. And if these times ever don't work for you, please feel free to um, email me, and I will find a way to set up an individual one for you, and we can do that some other time. Okay, so if you can't make it to those office hours that I set up twice a week, it's not a problem. Let's find a different time to work together. Okay, so I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you have a great day. Thanks.